Hello, everyone. I am Andrew, and this is Discovering the Truth. In today's video, I want to talk about something that I find to be bizarre, and honestly, something is definitely going on. And I'm sure that you guys have probably, if you look into cryptids and people in the woods and things like that, the missing people 411, I'm sure, comes up a lot. But something is just very concerning to me because it seems like this just keeps happening, but it seems like it keeps getting worse and worse. And then you have people that disappear and unfortunately are never heard of or seen, never found ever again. Then other people, they do unfortunately find them, unalived, which is saddening, but in very bizarre circumstances. And then other people are found alive, but they are, hundreds of miles where they should have been, but somehow have gotten really far and don't have any memory of it. Something is definitely going on here. Other people have claimed that they've seen people, search and rescue, and they're hollering for them, but yet there's nothing. They don't get a response, and they literally watching them walk by. And then places that search and rescue have looked for somebody couldn't find them, and then all of a sudden places that they already searched, they find the person. I do find that to be very bizarre. So I just want to give my personal thoughts on what could potentially be going on here, and I think it's a lot bigger and a lot deeper than what people can even imagine. Now, this is not saying any of this is true. I'm just giving my personal, opinions on this. So, I look at it like this. If you take somebody that is an expert outdoorsman and he decides he's going to go camping for a week in a location, but yet this gentleman will come up missing, vanish without a trace. His campsite's there, all of his food is there, but for some bizarre reason he decides to leave his, weapons, his food, everything, and then just is gone without a trace. Now, something is definitely wrong with that, because why would an expert outdoorsman, not take the essential things that he needs if he decides to leave his camp? And then on top of that, the only means of defending yourself in the woods would be with your weapon. You have bears, big cats, and many other different predators that are out there. And, professional people like this that do this on a regular basis, they know this and they understand the dangers of the woods and they understand the dangers of being lost. But yet, they just abandon their camp and then vanish, and no one can ever find them again. Now, let's talk about cryptids. Now, let's just say, and I'm not saying that they're real or not real. Now, I know for a fact they are real because I had my own personal experiences with things that I cannot explain. But if a gentleman is in the woods and something is hunting him, but he's not sure what it is because he simply does not believe in something like Bigfoot or Dogman or a pale crawler or a banshee or whatever it could possibly be, and he decides to go investigate it. Or how about like a Wendigo or a skinwalker that's calling for him in the woods? He goes to investigate it, thinking it is a person hurt or lost, or maybe it's disguising its voice as a family member, and he's lured in, taken, and is never heard of again. Now, that's a very big possibility because I'm sure if you guys have listened to any stories regarding, these creatures, monsters, that they are very evil. And I'm not saying all of them, but I could be wrong. They could all be evil, and I not know. But the chances of that is what's taking people in the woods I believe is a very, very high possibility. And it's a very scary thought. I mean, you got to think, how many stories have you heard of people having their name called from them in the woods? Or they hear a family member's voice calling them or beckoning to deeper into the woods or into a cave. It's very bizarre, and I don't see why so many people across the entire world would make that up. I mean, you got to think, we have national parks all over the entire world, from India, Japan, to the United States and beyond. And in all of these locations, there are countless people that vanish all over the place without a single trace. Now, if it's not cryptids, then what could it be? I mean, I look at it like this too, believe it or not, but according to, history and a lot of documentation, that fairies do exist. Now, you may not believe that, but fairies are not the cute, adorable things that you think they are. They're actually very evil, and they will take you. And I don't want to know what happens to you, but I do believe they are very much real. They fall in the same category as these cryptids. Now, if it's not this, then what could it be? I mean, could it be some type of human trafficking group that's taking people? It's possible, but I doubt it. Why would you go to the national forest, go through all that trouble just to get one or two people? So I'm going to say I'm going to rule that one out. Now, could it just be a lot of people just vanishing? Sure. I mean, don't get me wrong, it is saddening when people do get lost in the woods and they're never found again. And I'm not saying that all of these cases are something taking them. Because, people do get lost. They, the elements get to them, like hypothermia, dehydration, hunger, a lot of other factors to play in that, can really mess with you, especially being in the woods. And, being dehydrated or hungry or suffering from, hyperthermia, things like that. There's things your body does, and it's very easily to be confused, turned around, and you're not thinking straight. But let's say that somebody gets lost, and this person suffers from hyperthermia or something like that, and unfortunately they pass away. But here's my thing is, if that happened, how could they be hundreds of miles from where they should be? Or they should be in a location where, they took off their shoes and clothes because of hyperthermia and end up being hundreds of miles from where they should be. Now, I'm not saying that it's not possible, but it just seems very unlikely. I mean, it's just my personal opinion. Now, how about the people that vanish and end up being in places there's no way they could have gotten? Like, for instance, I heard this story of this gentleman that got lost in a national park and ended up all the way across the United States in California, which I think was over 3,000 miles away. He had a new haircut, a new phone, and he had no idea how he got there. Now, could this just be a case of him trying to flee and got caught? Maybe something like that. But the fact that all of his friends and family say he would never do that. Now, people are, sporadic and different. So maybe that's a possibility. Or how about when a child disappears and ends up on the opposite side of a mountain? Now, mind you, it is a child climbing a mountain and then going down the other side of the mountain and found. That does not seem like something like that would occur. I mean, I have children of my own. I could imagine, one of my kids disappearing and climbing up a mountain and down the other side. I mean, this is a child we're talking about. They're going to be confused, tired, hungry, they're not going to have the understanding of how dangerous it is to be doing that. Or how about some other children that have vanished and been found and have claimed that they have seen a large man that was helping them and guiding them? Or another case that I heard where there was this large wolf that was caring for this little girl in the woods and he brought her back to safety. Like I said, I'm not really sure, but I find something about all of this to be very, very disturbing. And I'm trying to understand more of it. I've been doing a lot of research of, looking up all these strange and bizarre disappearances. And then I always think that I think there's something more going on. And I think that our national park, park rangers and all that, I think they know a lot more than what they're actually telling people. Because I can't see that so many people have had encounters in neighborhoods and just woods outside of their house with these strange cryptid monsters. But I can only imagine what you could find in the woods alone. It's like if you were, in a submarine deep under the water and you're alone, could you imagine the things that you could find at the bottom of the ocean? Could there be monsters down there? Things that we have yet to discover? Very much so. But you gotta think, there are hundreds and thousands of miles of forest that no man has ever stepped foot in. So can you imagine the things that could actually be hiding in these locations? Or what strange, bizarre things could be out there? Like, think about all the other cases where people have claimed to find floating staircases out in the middle of the woods. Or finding, a strange house or structure out there and them going inside it and everything else, and then, making it back to safety, but going back to that location and the staircase is gone. The cabin in the woods, no pun intended there, but it's just gone. So how do you explain an entire structure just disappearing? And why would there be a staircase in the middle of the woods? And the reason I'm talking more about this because I really want to study more on this, and I really want to base a lot of my channel on the missing 411, but also I want to do a huge, compilation of all the research I've done here very soon on all the national parks and all the strange and bizarre things that go on in them. Because something is not right. There are so many stories, and there are so many unfortunately sad stories where people vanish and they do find their remains, but they'll end up being hundreds of miles and they have no idea how that person could have, made it through that terrain in that amount of time. Was something carrying them? Did they happen to step through a portal? Now, this is my opinion. You can take it with a grain of salt if you want, but I personally believe that these cryptids, these dogmans, these pale walkers, Bigfoot, I think the reason that people have such a hard time in finding these and why we're not able to hunt them and find them and capture them is because these creatures have a means of going through portals. And I believe these portals are part of the veil. And the reason that we cannot find them is because they use them to go from point A to point B to point Z. And what is the chances of a person lost in the woods, that's confused, lost, hungry, scared, and they happen to see something strange from the distance and they step through this portal. And then they're never heard of ever again. Are they going into a different dimension? Are they stuck in this other realm that's parallel to us? Kind of like if you look at Stranger Things, the Upside Down. The Upside Down was our world, but different and distorted and destroyed. But it was still the same place. Who's to say something like that is not real? I mean, you have to think. They hide a lot of stuff from us, but the best way to hide something is in plain sight. That is literally the best place to hide anything. Think about how many times you've been looking for your phone and it was laying right in front of you. Or how about you're looking everywhere for a pen and your pen is literally lying right there, but your mind just overlooks it. And I believe that's what's going on here. Now, excuse me. Let me take a drink real quick. Now, I'm pretty sure a lot of you guys don't play video games. I am a gamer, and I admit to that. But, I do a lot of other things besides that. But there was a particular game that I played that I found to be very, very strange and bizarre. And I actually got to thinking, I was like, what if something like this couldn't be true? Now, I'm not saying that the video game is real, and I'm not saying that, but what if there's a possibility of what is going on in this game? Could it be some part of reality? In this game, there's this strange entity, this creature, this thing that preys upon people that are, lost or confused or alone. And this thing captures them and sucks them into the world of the entity. And of course, they have to run for their lives while these killers are trying to get them. And when they die, they get basically born again, reincarnated again, to have to suffer this same fate forever. But in the midst of that, in the story of the game, many of these characters get lost, and they send out search teams. They can't find them. There's absolutely no trace at all of the people that disappear. And it kind of I was like, wow, what if something is not taking them and pulling them in to a different realm? Or maybe it's just by pure accident. You're just walking along, you have no idea, and you happen to cross through, a strange, group of trees or some strange bushes or maybe strange vines, and yet you can't see that it's a portal, but it's actually there. And you happen to step through it unannounced to you, and now you are trapped, lost, confused, and no matter what search teams go out to look for you, no matter the dog teams that go out, you have thermal imaging drones, helicopters, everything, but they find nothing. And we're talking about people that literally vanish without a trace, just gone, to be never heard of ever again. Or how about people that are with a friend on a walking trail, and they go around a corner, they watch their friend go around a corner, and then that person is gone. Now you're trying to tell me that if one of your friends is out there hiking with you, and they're up, a little ways in front of you, and they turn around a bend, a corner, and when you catch up to them, they're just gone. But you hear no sound, you holler for their name, and there's nothing. There's no response, there's no answer. And there's times where this has happened where people have documented that literally in the dirt they see their footsteps or their feet print, and they just stop right there, and they're gone. So if something took them or grabbed them, of course you would probably hear some type of disturbance, branches breaking, debris, or, them fighting this thing off, or, screaming, hollering. But there's nothing. So how can you explain that? It doesn't make any sense. And there are so many cases that even right here, that I have been reading, to where so many people have just vanished and to never be heard of ever again. And I mean, this list goes on for forever. Now, I'm not saying that all of these people vanished in that way. Of course, there are crazy people in this world, and I'm sure that, unfortunately, a lot of these people were probably taken by, a serial killer or something of that nature, predators that do exist and they are out there. But there's too many of them to all be, just coincidence. I believe there's something far more, dark and evil that's at play. And I think that these national parks and the government and other things know about what's going on, but they will never let the public find out. Just like with cryptids, there are so many people, and I'm one of these people, that have had an encounter with something that simply cannot be explained. But if I went to, work or a mall, and I start talking on a loudspeaker about how, I had an encounter with a pale walker, or pale crawler, excuse me. maybe if there's 100 people there, maybe one, maybe two of those people would actually listen to my story and believe it. The other 99 or 98 people would not. So it's kind of like with, this whole thing I'm talking about right now. Most people are like, oh, people just get lost, they fall off cliffs, they get hurt, and I get that. But how does somebody fall and get hurt, but they find no remains? Or how about they find one shoe, or a piece of clothing, or somebody's cell phone? So if somebody's been lost for days and days and days, why do they find their book bags filled with resources, food? Even some people have their cell phones, satellite phones, even like tracking devices on them, so if they get lost, but they just been disabled, they can't track the phone, nothing. And there's been people that have, of course, have survived these encounters of being lost and said that they seen very strange and bizarre things out in the woods. People have been, claimed to have been hunted by something. By, you have feral people that, people have claimed to have encountered and have seen. People have seen Bigfoot, Dogman, and other strange and bizarre creatures out there in the woods, but nobody believes them. Now, I'm not saying that people here that watch stuff that I make on my channel, but I do find it to be very, very strange and bizarre that all these things are, all over the place, and there's not bigger stories on this. I mean, I think this should be national news that so many people vanish, and that's it. They're just gone. And it's just like, oh, this person went missing, and we're looking for them, and that's all the coverage you get. And why is the national park so adamant on covering these things up? Why are they so adamant of not speaking on them? Not unless they have something to hide. Because I can't understand why they would try to keep all this, hidden from the public. And it's like if you ask about these stories, they say, oh, they just disappeared. It happens all the time. Okay, well, what happened to them? Was their bodies found? Were there items that they had found? In some cases, yes, and in others, no. So, I don't mean to ramble on about it, but I just want to give everybody kind of an update that I'm going to do a lot of stuff about missing people and covering a bunch of these stories, because there's some of them that are just absolutely mind-blowing. And I actually, not me, but my dad actually had a good friend of his that vanished one time out in the woods, and he's never been found to this day. Now, I don't know all the details of the story. My dad said he's going to tell me this story, but he had a good buddy of his that was, that he went hunting with and things like that, and he went out on a little excursion of his own and vanished, and he's never been found ever. They've never found his remains, nothing, but according to what my dad did tell me, he said that he had a campsite. Everything was intact in his campsite. He had his food hung way up in a tree to, keep bears away. And they found everything except they did not find his cell phone. That was the only thing that he had on him. Now, I don't know. You guys be the judge. But if you guys like content like this and want to help out a, smaller YouTuber that's trying to grow, you can like and subscribe if you want. It's completely free. And look forward to a lot of other stories and other content like this when it comes to cryptids, when it comes to strange and bizarre things like the whole missing people 411 phenomenon that is going on. I'll be covering a lot of that, and starting not this week but next week, I'm going to start doing lives on TikTok to where I will have an open channel to where you can submit that you want to come onto the live, and if you have a personal, encounter or story of something that is bizarre, scary, any of that stuff, especially when it comes to cryptids, or anything paranormal, UFOs, any of that stuff, feel free to join me on there. But for everything else, I greatly appreciate all the support. I do have 115 subscribers. I'm trying to at least get to 500. I'm trying to get this, established, because I would like to turn this into a full-time job. But anyways, thank you for all the support, and thank you everybody. And just do everybody a favor. If you go to the woods, if you're going camping, if you're just going for a hike, even on a walking trail, if your children are with you or you have a friend with you, you guys need to stay close to each other. Keep a close eye on each other, keep a close eye on your children, because if you truly take the time to go on the internet and just type in the missing people 411, bizarre cases behind this, you will be completely mind blown how big this is and how many cases there are and how they're still happening to this day. So anyway, I am Andrew, and this is Discovering the Truth. I hope everyone has a wonderful and amazing day, and I look forward to seeing all of you guys in the next one. Have a wonderful day. I'm out.